Hello and welcome to today's episode. Wow, have we got an episode for you? We are delving into a new topic for the podcast, and we really dug deep into clairs, into indigos, into just a different way of life, and really helping you to know that you are not broken. It's a really interesting conversation with a friend of mine who I recently got introduced to when I came to South Africa. Her name is Alyce Dylan, and she is an intuitive counselor, Reiki master, and she works with spiritually perceptive, indigos, or any of those hypersensitive, or whatever labels you've thought of or heard. So do grab a cuppa and come and listen to this conversation, because it's quite eye-opening and it is a really interesting and beautiful conversation.
But as always, before we dive into the conversation, very quick reminder, please hit subscribe, hit follow wherever you are listening, wherever you're tuning in. We would appreciate you supporting us and following us and liking and sharing. The more people do that, the more people we get to listen to these wonderful conversations and learning from our wonderful guests. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for all the support. And now let's dive into this really lovely conversation.
Hi, Alyce. Welcome to our episode today. It is so wonderful to have you here, and we're really, really excited to get into this wonderful topic that I'm sure you're going to be sharing with us and our listeners.
Hi, it's good to meet you both, and it's a pleasure to be here.
So as we normally say is, welcome and who are you? What is it that you do? But we like to dig a little deeper, and it's what got you where you are today. Is it something that you were born with? Is it something that life threw at you or kicked you up your behind to get you onto the path today? So a little bit of who you are, but also what got you to where you are today.
All right, so I now am an intuitive counselor. I've been practicing Reiki for 27 years, but I've been teaching for 25. So what got me to today, I think, is the state of the world. I think it's where we are. I was very, very fortunate to have an Indigo grandmother who used to have conversations every morning with her husband, my grandfather, while she sat at the dressing table. And what I eventually figured out was that no one else could see him. And so I learned that there are a lot of people in the world that don't see and experience life as my grandmother and I did. And that carried on. And of course, I went through that phase of shutting that down and trying to be a normie, trying to be normal and doing the normal things. But of course, I harnessed that ability anyway, because you do. And I harnessed it in business and did very well. But nothing I achieved in business gave me fulfillment. Nothing. I built a huge business. I had 700 employees across the country. I traveled all over the world. I gave talks, I gave lectures. It was a very A-type personality life. I was always reaching for that more. But at the same time, on the side, I was teaching Reiki. And I was hanging out with people on the lunatic fringe, they used to say. People who were into alternative medicine and alternative thought. And I eventually found who I truly was through that. So I think while I was born with natural ability, which I think all indigos are, and I'm going to correct that because the wording really needs to be spiritually connected people. Spiritually connected individuals is the cheeky word the phrase I've come up with, because it leans into the whole sci-fi thing. But spiritually connected individuals is anybody from the indigo, clair, intuitive, empath, that entire category of people. And I firmly believe, and I've come to really know, are on the leading edge of the evolution of humanity. Humanity's ready to take a big leap forward. And there are a lot of forces out there that won't go down rabbit holes, but there are a lot of forces out there that are trying to prevent that. But whatever they do, the indigos still keep popping up. The clairs still keep emerging. The highly sensitive or HSPs still keep coming up. And so it's really time to take the bull by the horns and say, okay, humanity's ready. Let's move forward. So with that and with Reiki, I did counseling and started an intuitive counseling practice, which I had already been doing in an informal way for a while. And I found that the need was great. There are very many people out there who have been trying to fit themselves into the normal box for a very long time. And they just never got it right. So they've come to think of themselves as broken normies. I'm a normal person, I'm just broken. No, dear, you're not. You're an indigo, or you're a clair, or you're an empath, or whatever else it is. You're a psi, you know? And so that's what led me to write Alone in a Sea of Normal during lockdown. Because, I mean, what else do you do but write books during lockdowns, you know? So I took all those years of counseling and all those years of teaching Reiki and dealing with people out there, and I put it in a book. And my hope is that it will reach people where they are, so that when people are sitting around pulling their hair out thinking how deficient they are, how unworthy they are, how lacking they are, because they've never been able to fit in the normal box, they can really know why. They can understand why the normal box was never for them. And I have a podcast, obviously, on YouTube. It's not like yours. Yours is a brave and multi-personed one. Mine's just me talking about the world and from an indigo or an empath or an intuitive perspective. So I just offer perspectives to people who have always sat on the cusp. And it always surprises me to meet people who think they're normal, just battling, and I take one look at them and of course you're an indigo. Of course you're an indigo. And so I think there are a lot of people out there, possibly a lot of people who listen to your show, who have never felt like they fitted in, who never felt like the world was made for them, who have this undeniable urge to go home, wherever that is, but it's not here, and who feel like the title of the book, Alone in a Sea of Normal. So it's them that I want to say, you know, the indigos are miraculous if they've just made it to 25. Even the white coats admit that if a sensitive gets to 25, they're 1 in a million, because most of us find a way to leave the planet before that. And no, I'm not talking abduction by aliens. You know, a lot of us don't make it past 25. So any indigo who's made it to 25 is already an exceptional soul. And my life mission is to find them all and help them heal, because I really feel like we'll be very much needed in what's to come. There we go. Did that cover all the bases? You ladies asked a lot of things.
It covers a lot. It gives us a wonderful introduction and welcome and a little bit of perspective on what is, that you're all about and who you are. And for me, in my mind, is, definition of normal. Who is normal? What is normal? Who decides what is the average that we consider normal and what is the abnormal? And my whole life, I have hated the label normal. Whenever someone was like, this and this is normal, I'm like, I'm more than happy to be called not normal. I'm happy to be called weird, and I want to be anything but normal. Because, and I think this conversation of looking at, you don't necessarily have to go to the extreme, I don't want to say extreme, but be really out there with thinking that, are you an indigo? Are you really that sensitive? Or we are all unique beings. So what is normal? So I'm kind of curious to explore, if we can, a little bit of kind of your journey into more in-depth understanding how you then reconciled in yourself the normal, not normal, who is normal, who is not normal, being as a label of, normal is negative and normal is positive, versus, I see normal as kind of very boring and a negative, like I don't want to be normal. And obviously talking to, even listeners who don't maybe feel like, oh, I don't think I'm an indigo, I don't think I'm that, out there, I don't think I'm that spiritual, I don't think I'm that intuitive, but I'm definitely not normal. Can we have a little exploration around the theme of, it's a scale and we all are unique individuals. By default, that means there's nothing like normal.
Well, actually, this gives a lovely intro into a study that was done recently. You can find the whole discussion. It was on a Joe Rogan podcast about a couple of weeks ago, and a professor did an independent study. So entirely independent, not linked to any white coats besides himself, which is important. But he did a study on, he was looking for the psychic gene. There we go. He was like, well, there are these people that say they're psychic, and surely there must be something wonky with them. There must be something wrong with them. Let's have a look. I won't go into details, but effectively, he ended up isolating the psychic gene. He studied 3,000 people, narrowed it down, and found one particular set of people that had demonstrable psychic abilities. Whether it was on the Indigo, Empath, whatever range, they were definitely, provably spiritually connected. Okay. And then he took a bunch of normies, and they were his control group. And this is going to blow your mind. It certainly blew mine. It turns out that the psychics had the wild type human gene. In other words, we are the normals. The spiritually perceptive have normal human DNA. Our DNA is entirely normal, but it's wild. It's got no changes, no alterations, nothing. The wild DNA, human wild, if organic, if you like. Our DNA is 100% normal. The normies, on the other hand, have mutated a blocking mechanism that blocks their spiritual perception. So once they knew what they were looking for, they had a look at all the DNA samplings from the world, and they looked for where was this mutated gene most prevalent. And it was in all the countries that were Christianity dominated during the time of the Spanish Inquisition and the time just after. So people like me, Indigos, clairs, we've always thought of ourselves as, and Hollywood tries so hard to make us seem like mutants. They even use the word mutants. But it turns out that the normies are the mutants. They mutated a gene to block spiritual perception in order to survive, which is fine. I mean, nobody blames anyone for that. And here's the thing that really blew my mind. So he's developed a nasal spray to unblock the mutant gene. And he's using it for dementia and Alzheimer's and things like that because he's found that it helps, which of course it does, and there's a whole reason for that. But now imagine this. We've just gone through COVID, and goodness knows what anybody thinks about that. But now imagine if we had a nasal spray that could wake up all the normals to be spiritually connected. And that's a mind-blowing thought, because now, what would that even look like? You know, I was blessed to have a framework when I'll give you an example, because you did ask specifically about me, so I'll tell you. When I was 5 years old, I woke up at, I think it was possibly 10 or 11 o'clock at night, screaming blue murder. And of course, the parental unit came down and, what's wrong? And I told them that Granny had been in an accident and they needed to go find Granny now. And of course, they said, no, you're just having a nightmare. Granny just went to visit friends. She'll be back just now, and go back to sleep. And I wouldn't. I just kept screaming, and and then the phone rang, and it was the hospital to say that Granny had been in a car accident, and that everybody should get over to the hospital now. I will never forget the look on their faces in that moment. And I think that was one of my defining moments, because my parents, that set anyway, were very normal. And the look they gave me was kind of between horror and fear, somewhere in that range. And it felt like a pivotal moment, like I had just been found out for stealing cookies from the cookie jar or something far worse, you know. And so I knew from that moment that whatever I saw, whatever I knew, I really should keep to myself. And then that was confirmed. Granny, and we never discussed it again. It was never mentioned. But I knew then that there was something very different about who I was. And I think that's what my relationship with normal changed on that day. Because on that day, while I had assumed until then that I was a normal 5-year-old, I knew on that day that I wasn't, you know. And then the examples just piled up, like chatting to Grandpa, who would come and visit Granny every morning, and you know, having chats with people that I was later told had moved on, and that became a relationship with an ability that I had to figure out if I wanted, even because when the normal world is telling you, no, you don't do this if you do it. In fact, they tried to medicate me at 13, which I didn't do. I didn't follow that path. But in the 3 hours, they'd given me these little white tablets because they said to me I was ADHD. And they gave me these little white tablets to take. And I took one, and I was on the bus to school. And I remember suddenly the whole world went quiet. I couldn't hear anybody's, I couldn't feel anyone. My whole life I had been inundated with this emotional impact. Suddenly the world was deafeningly quiet. My whole life I had lived with the impact of other people's, not so much thoughts in a clear thought way, but certainly their emotions, their thoughts too, if the thought was clear enough. But definitely all of their attitudes and their opinions and all of that. And I sat there, and also I had a very clear link to my grandmother and to another woman who was like my soul mother. And in that moment, sitting there on that bus, I reached out. I couldn't feel my grandmother. I couldn't feel my soul mother. And suddenly everything was quiet. I couldn't feel these people around me. I couldn't feel the world. The world felt dead. And so I reached into my school bag and I took out the box of little white pills and I threw them out the bus window. All I knew was that had to go. That had to go. And I remember the thought at the time is, if I have to be someone else in order to survive this world, then I'd rather not. You know, I will learn how to live through the noise. I'll learn how to live through the excess of emotion and the excess of energy and things, rather than shut it off, because in those 3 hours, I was not me. I was not who I am. And so that's my relationship with normal, was that the white coats, and I think in a global sense, there's a real rabbit hole to go down here. Starting with the Nazis in 1940s and then carrying on. Fluoride in the water. Fluoride calcifies the pineal gland. Pineal gland stops when the pineal gland is calcified. It cuts off spiritual perception. And suddenly after World War II, the entire world had fluoride in its water. Can you imagine what that must have taken? The feat of introducing fluoride into the municipal water of the entire globe in the 1940s, when there were no telephones. Can you imagine what that must have been? Somebody must have been really determined to get that done. And so the one piece of news is that they've done this study now, and spiritually perceptive individuals are actually the normals, and that's now a DNA normal. But the other piece of news that came out this last month, it's been a really busy month, was the declassification of the Stargate CIA files. And there we know that the CIA since the 1960s has known that human beings are naturally capable of learning how to affect time and space, how to do telepathy, how to affect reality. And it said there's a long list. So those files are now declassified. So what is normal? I think that what is normal is spiritual perception. I just think that there are forces in humanity that have been fighting against that for so long. Because humanity is not controllable when it's spiritually perceptive. Humanity is not controllable when we listen first to our guides. I call them fairies, just because dead people is not true. They're not dead. They're not, definitely not. They're not inert. They're very loud. And so I like to call them fairies because that denotes a happy picture. So our fairies are never quiet. And if we are listening to our fairies first, before we listen to the propaganda and the noise and everything else, then we won't be controllable. And there is a force. Like Robert Frost says, something there is that doesn't like a wall, and something there is in humanity that doesn't like an uncontrolled population. So we will see. It seems all to be coming together in what's happening out there in the world. Great changes afoot, old world coming down, and I believe, it is my true and centered belief that it is the Indigos, the spiritually perceptive, the clairs, the HSPs that will take humanity forward. And we will be needed to take humanity into its next phase. Because wow, can you imagine what the world's going to be like when we figure this out? When we figure out telepathy instead of cell phones. When we figure out how to teleport around. Can you imagine? There's going to be these new fields of discovery, and people will be arty like you won't believe, because art is a channeled ability. People will be making great art. They will be creating amazing things. But that's ahead of us. And what we need for that is we need indigos, clairs, whatever label people like. We need all of us whole, healthy, ready to get on with it, which isn't there yet, but hopefully we're moving in that direction.
So I know that, you and I have had this conversation many times, but this one now is for our listeners. Is you've used the word clair and indigo a lot, and it's something that I'm even learning to come to terms with, even though you have told me many times that I am an indigo, and it's something that I'm having to process because I never really understood what indigos were, but always thought they were just these special people who were a minority in the world, and there's no way that I could be one. So for our listeners who are most probably sitting where I've been sitting and not necessarily understanding what an indigo or a clair is, but knowing about it a little bit, is how can they find out if that's who they are? Because I've known you now for a good few months, and we've spent many hours having conversations, and I still come to you and say, but are you sure? Because it's something that for all the years is trying to fit into the box. But the one thing that I do have is that I never fitted in, and I always felt broken and wrong and incomplete. So for our listeners, maybe dig a little deeper into the clairs. I mean, most of us have heard of like clairvoyant, but there's other clairs as well, but also the indigo, because this is something that's not necessarily spoken about a lot. just in mainstream, or it's not something that's really understood. And it's taken me a good few months to wrap my head around on what an indigo is, or the potential. So if you can maybe just break it down a little bit for our listeners who may be in that position of, as you said, feeling weird, feeling like they don't fit in, feeling broken, and helping them to maybe look at themselves in a different light, and starting to hopefully have that realization that, oh, okay, actually, I'm not broken. I'm an indigo. I'm not broken. I'm a clair. And just helping to do that. And of course, we will have your book, the link for the book, in the description, so they can also read the book to help. But if you can maybe sort of, dare I say, dumb it down a bit, just especially for the people like me who, like, there's no way that I can be a special person. There's no way that I can be something other than this broken human being who's just trying to survive in the world.
So the reason I called the book Alone in a Sea of Normal is because that's the first sign. What spiritually perceptive children do is, from day one, they try to fit into the normal box, and it doesn't fit, and they don't fit. And what they tend to do is self-isolate for two reasons. Firstly, because they are now playing a role. They're modeling themselves over their normal peers or their normal brothers or sisters. They're modeling themselves over something normal, and they want to minimize the amount of exposure so that they won't be found out to not really fit that mold. The second thing is that the world is loud. So from young, we find other people's emotions, other people's drama, other people's... I remember walking around the world knowing which adults were lying and why, and which were just icky. They were icky, and they were like, ew. I didn't know what it was. I just knew it was ew. Like, you're pretty and you dress real nice, but you're ew. So we tend to self-isolate. It's I'd say about a 98% commonality amongst spiritually perceptive children that we self-isolate. Now, whether that's physically, in other words, we stay in our room and read books most of the time, or if we self-isolate and just wear a really strong mask. I've known some indigos that were life and soul of the party, popular kids, because they wore such a successful mask out there, but hid themselves so well. So the very first sign is self-isolation. You remember back to childhood, and you had to take time out as a kid. You had to go hide your head under the blankets. You had to go and sit in the garden in a tree. That brings me to number 2, nature. Indigo children or spiritually perceptive children have a unique relationship with nature. We love it. I'm not saying we go around hugging all the trees, but we find ourselves at peace when in nature. That's the best we ever feel as children, is when we're surrounded by just natural things. Then the other sign, as more of an adult, is norm. See, this has become a problem now. The normies had such a strong label. Now I don't know what to call them. The 5 cents, I do know what to call them, I'm joking. The 5 cents do not have an internal dialogue. Think about that for a moment. As an indigo or as a clair or as a spiritually perceptive person, you've been running a dialogue in your head ever since you were born. Like, really? What am I about to do? I'm about to pick this up. No, don't do that. How about, should we really think we should do that? Is this a good idea? That's, to us, it's normal. Internal dialogue. 5 sense people don't have that. Think about, hold on, no, really, take a moment. Imagine a quiet mind where only your own thoughts arise. You never have any exchange. There's never any back and forth. Yeah? That was mind-blowing to me when I found that out. I couldn't imagine being in that much solitude. Can you imagine? So 5-sensed individuals have very quiet minds. They don't have an internal dialogue. They're not receiving external input beyond their 5 senses. So if anyone's ever had any intuitive moment where they've just known, don't go here, turn here, stop the car, wait, don't cross, whatever it is, an intuitive moment, guess what? You're an indigo or you're a spiritually perceptive individual. If you ever had a visitation from a family member that just died, when people pass over, when they hit transition, they have an incredible amount of power in that moment to go visiting. And they often show up at people they love and announce their passing. So a lot of people have had experiences with loved ones that have just passed. If you were 5 sense, you would never have been able to interpret that visitation. The person would have visited, but you would have had nowhere to interpret that data. So 5 sense people don't see, they don't feel energy shifts. They don't feel the room change just before the evidence of why it's changing shows up. 5 sense people also have very linear abilities. They're able to focus really absolutely on a topic, a thing, and just remain stuck. Indigos, we're receiving too much information all the time. Very seldom. We can get passionate about a subject and then you put us on that subject and we're all there. But if you give us a set of tasks to click 100 million boxes, wow, we really struggle with that because there's too much else going on, you know. So 5 sensed, and if someone has ever had an intuitive moment, their sentience is a real thing. Clair sentience is just knowing. It's like you're just there and you think about your friend Ashley and she phones, or sitting around thinking about whoever and they call, you know. As for the Indigo child, this was written, it's a book written in the late 60s by a woman called Mary Empath, and she was a researcher. She was a white coat. She also happened to be a clair. She was voyant in a very particular way. She saw auras. So, outside of that, she didn't think she was in any way different. She just saw these bubbles around people. And she was doing a study on primary, what we, like 6, 7, 8, 5, 6, 7, 8, that range of children. And she, in her years of doing this research, she discovered that year on year, there were more and more spiritually perceptive children coming up through the education system. And so she started testing them. And she found that it was actually a build. So what we know now about this is about 200 years ago, there was a cosmic event. It's a rabbit hole, you can go down it. It's lots of things happened. The stars aligned, whatnot. And ever since that date, while they've always been spiritually perceptive clairvoyant, psychic, whatever you like, people in the world, they were usually one lineage, or they were 1 in a million. And they usually got assigned to the local healer or whoever, and they worked with them, and that was fine. From about 200 years ago, we started to multiply. We started to be born everywhere and into every family, and even families whose DNA should not have produced us, we started to come up. So it's been 200 years of a build. Now, what are our numbers right now? Pre-COVID, the white coats were admitting that about 25% of humanity was sensitive. Yeah? Which really means that we're 40 to 50%. So that was pre-COVID. The impact of that, I don't know now what our numbers are. But those are pretty impressive numbers based on the fact that only 1 in 25 of us makes it, 1 in 20 of us makes it to 25. Having 40% of us as spiritually perceptive is still good. A lot of people don't know, that they're spiritually perceptive. They just think they're broken. And that's why I wrote the book. Because if people have always felt like they didn't fit in, like there's just something wrong with them, they can't put their finger on it, but they just know they're not normal, to read the book. Because if you understand what a spiritually perceptive person is, and it doesn't mean, look, I was clairvoyant from young, but not everybody sees. We're very much in control of this. I don't do audience. I don't do clairaudience. Not because I can't, but because it freaks me out. My fairies know that if I'm the only person in a room and someone starts chatting to me, it's going to weird me out. So they don't do it unless it's an emergency circumstance. If it's an emergency, they will say my name, and then I'll know, okay, all right, something's big here, something I really need to pay attention to. But the clairs are vast, as you said. I have a client who's clairnascient, and that's fascinating. So people smell bad to her, bad people smell bad to her, and good people smell good to her. So she works off smell. I have another client who gets rashes around evil people or people with evil intent. Let's leave the word evil. People with negative intent give her hives. She literally gets hives when she's around people who are not well-meaning. What else? Weird ones. Sentience is the easiest one because it's just knowing. It's just knowing. I just know that I must phone my friend. I just know that there's something wrong with the neighbor. Whatever it is, sentience is really common. And we possibly all have it, all of the spiritually perceptive. So yes, so there's a broad range. And in the last 200 years, we've suddenly been multiplying and there's more and more of us, which has been a problem because in the old days, they would identify a child young who was spiritually perceptive and assign them to go and train with the village elders or go train with the local healer or go train with the wise man on the hill, even. Whatever structure that culture had. Of course, now that's no longer a thing. So you have these super sensitive people all over the place with no guidance. All they know is that the world feels loud. They just want to get away from it. Unfortunately, a lot of us survive through addiction. That's a lot of our survival mechanism, just to shut out the world, shut out the incoming data that we don't know how to process, So a lot of addicts. In fact, I've never met an addict, I don't think. I'm just thinking about it. No, I've never met one addict. Met one addict that was 5 cents. But that was a chemical thing. A lot of spiritually perceptive people are addicts, and not only to chemicals, addicted to drama, addicted to codependence, addicted to anything that can help them focus their attention on the present moment. Because that's the one thing that until we learn how to receive that information in an organized way, like, guys, send to the facts. I don't need it when I'm driving in traffic, until we learn how to negotiate and how to order the incoming information so it's manageable. It's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. But fortunately, there are more and more people out there now who are survived indigo adults. And, sorry, did I finish the story about Mary Ann Tapp? Anyway, she discovered that there were more and more of us. Because she could see auras, she saw that all of us had indigo auras. And so she called us the Indigo Children. And she wrote a book called The Indigo Children. And so the phenomenon is known as the Indigo Child. This idea of a whole lot of people spiritually awakening over this period. I first came across the Indigo Child when I think I was in maybe I was doing a Reiki workshop. Someone handed me the book. Oh, and it made me mad. It made me so mad. Firstly, she said, the world is saved. World peace is here. The Indigo Children are here. Yay. Secondly, she didn't at one time mention what it would be like for the Indigo Children growing up in this 5-sensed, loud, out-of-control world. She had this great hope for humanity because of the Indigo Children, but never once was there any attention given to, wow, I wonder what it must be like to grow up as a 6th-sensed or a spiritually perceptive child in this world. And when I was growing up, it was 80s, 90s, and it was the era of deception. It was the era of advertising, and whatever we say is true. And the era of shaping the world according to how much publicity you could give it. And so I looked around the world, and when you're an indigo or a spiritually perceptive person, untruth hits you. You can't not. You can hear untruth when it's spoken, and you can feel untruth when you see it or when you experience it. And so when you're a child, being told honesty is a good thing, you must be honest, and yet the people on the television are lying to everybody all the time, it's a really confusing state. And so, so that's the Indigo Children. And so I made it my mission in writing the book and in what I do is to try to make sure that the next generation of Indigo Children are not subjected to that world, at least without a lot more awareness from parents, from public, from everybody, on what this means.
Thank you so much for that, Alyce. It's so much information, and it's something that's not just popped up over the last couple of years. It's something that's really been there, and it's something that I'm been digging into and learning more about over the last few months of speaking with you, because luckily when I moved to South Africa, I got introduced to you, and you are just down the road from me. So yay, I get into the car and we can have conversations, and we have had a lot of conversations. And this is why I wanted you to come on here to help our listeners, because we created this podcast for people to have more life in their life and learning who they are, and that they're not broken, but actually they are spiritually perceptive, they are indigo, they are a clair, whatever it is, to help them to understand so that they can start to find ways to create more life in their life and to find ways to really sort of fit in. So thank you. You've really dug in and I think thrown poor Lenka into the deep end. But it's a great way to get that information out there. So we really appreciate you spending some time with us and sharing your experiences, but also creating some clarity around these words that we hear but don't necessarily understand or even realize that that's us. So thank you for that.
There's so much jargon out there, you know, and it's not only the jargon, but it's, you know, whenever a group of people feel isolated or unseen or unknown, they tend to branch off humanity into these subsets. And so there's a lot of stuff out there about Akashic records and that the spiritually perceptive are babies of angels. Or what's the other one? That we are babies of aliens, the babies of aliens, or babies of angels, or all of those things. And what that does is it really makes people, it puts it out there on the end of woo-woo, and someone sitting at home just with the knowing that they're not normal, but they have no idea how to find healing for themselves or alignment or acceptance for themselves, tends to shy away from all of that bargain and all of that woo-woo. I did. To be honest with you, 27 years ago, I would not have ended up in a Reiki class were I not kind of dragged there by a friend who called in a favor. So, because in my mind, even though I was a clair, those people were really out there. You know, I mean, they just like waved burning sticks around and they were just weird. So I think for a lot of people, it's become inaccessible because of all the jargon. And that's why I'm trying to say to everyone, Indigo, HSB, whatever label the white coats have given us over the years, I'm not happy with labels that are given. If I'm going to wear a label, I want to choose it. And so spiritually connected individual, spiritually perceptive, whichever of those labels people feel comfortable with, I'm happy with either one. And I'd like it because it was chosen by us, not by a white coat somewhere. The other one, and this really is for Lenka, but the other very clear sign that someone is an indigo is if they get along better with animals than with people. If they feel, honestly, because animals are honest and people are not, and we feel that. And so if you feel you have better relationships with animals than you have with people, then you're an indigo, a spiritually perceptive individual. And so because 5 sense people don't get that feedback, they're not in that loop. So dishonesty doesn't bother them outside of it being an intellectual component. Like dishonesty bothers them from a justice or a right and wrong perspective, but it doesn't bother them energetically, which is what the Indigos feel. We're bothered by dishonesty. We're bothered by aggravation, and we're bothered by aggressive behavior. We're bothered in an energetic sense. But animals, they don't have that problem. They're not dishonest. They'll tell you exactly what they're doing, what they're feeling. They're not dishonest. So if we have a better relationship with animals than with people, it's generally because we're Indigo. And I certainly did. As a child, I loved my animals, adored them. People, I could take or leave, but nature and animals, those were, yeah, and still to this day, I'd take a crowd of ducks over a crowd of people any day. So, it's worth, for anyone out there who is wondering, it's worth exploring. It's worth exploring, because if you find that you are a spiritually perceptive individual, and the reason you've never made it at being normal is because you never were, and you might find that there is real acceptance and self-knowledge, and there are some very good tools now. Before, an empire, when I was growing up, we were just left to our own devices. You survive the crowds or you don't. You survive the day or you don't. You get through it, you figure it out, or you don't. But now, meditation is always the one I start with everyone, because it helps us to clear the noise. It helps us to center. It helps us to align. But there are things like tapping, EFT tapping. There are things like bubbling. There are so many tools now that we can use to drown out the noise, to reach self-acceptance, and to heal, that it's no longer worth denying that you're not normal. It's just not anymore.
Thank you so much for that. And it's been really good to dig deeper into it for our listeners, as well as to help them to start to not feel so alone, because I think that is that's also something, is you just feel so alone. So thank you. So this is the part in the episode that we call the gold nuggets. Now, you have given us a lot already, but we always like that more. We like to have our little gold nuggets. So Alyce, may we please have your gold nugget?
Funny that you said there are so many people feeling alone, because that's another thing that came out in the news in the last month, that there's an epidemic of loneliness, which actually to me is really exciting, because that means there are a lot of Indigos out there. There are a lot more of us out there than we think. And if we could just for a moment embrace that we are on the leading edge of the evolution of humanity, and that humankind is evolving. Whether we like it or not, humanity is evolving. And we're on the leading edge of that. We are trailblazers. We were born into a five-sensed world that was neither ready for us nor prepared for us. But it is going to be our job to take humanity forward. And so there's no time limit. If anyone even suspects that they may be other sensed, sixth sensed, spiritually perceptive, they really need to get their big girl or big boy pants on now and get ready, because we are needed. We are needed. We are so desperately needed. But one of our commonalities is the self-isolation. This, what we think of as loneliness. But really what it is it's intolerance for noise. And when I say noise, I mean energetic noise. Five-sensed humans walk around energetically vomiting their emotions over everybody all the time. And we simply can't tolerate that. We just can't bear it. So we either have to rely on a chemical to dumb us down and to make us numb, or we can step into our authentic selves and figure it out. Figure out how to stop the noise. Yeah. And like I say, there are a lot of tools now. So now it's really up to people who, if anyone thinks they're lonely, there is not a human being that I have met anywhere in this world, and I've traveled, who is not surrounded by a legion of supporters and guides in the next world. I promise you, if you knew how not alone you are, you might buy a lead-lined box just to go and have a private moment. You are never alone, not for one moment. Of course, it's not creepy because they no longer have eyes, so what they perceive is in the thought realm. It's not in the... So they don't come and watch you go to the loo. They just know what you're thinking, and they think with you, and they're involved in those conversations. But everyone that I work with, that I've experienced, is so loved. They are so loved, and they are not alone. And so if you are maybe spiritually perceptive, and you felt like you're all alone, go have a look at maybe Alone in a Sea of Normal, or just go down the rabbit hole. Look up Indigo Child. Go and look at the Sixth Sense, or spiritually perceptive, or highly sensitive people, whatever it is. And go and see, maybe you're one of us. Because if you're one of us, then family's waiting. The family's waiting to welcome you home.
Thank you so much. And this is why we love our gold nuggets. We always get something really special and really awe-inspiring or wise. So thank you so much.
And I just realized that my whole life I had been using my empathy in sales. First thing is I never sold anything I didn't believe in. So, that was okay. But also with every person I ever sat with, I could see what they needed. I could see what they wanted. I could see 360 around someone. And that always helped me in dealing with people, which was the path that led me to counseling. But it really showed me that this five-sense world where salespeople have to follow certain formulas. No, the intuitive, the spiritually perceptive can be exceptional at various things in a five-sense world. We have wonderful gifts. We have exceptional abilities. We are not broken. It has just served a section of the population to keep hammering into us that we are broken in order to keep us controllable. And I think when you realize that, you get mad, because getting mad is good sometimes. When you get mad, you get the energy to shift, to change perspective, and to really do what it takes to step into your authentic self. And I think authenticity, there's nothing that beats showing up in every moment as your authentic self. No holds barred. That was my big aha moment. The minute I could walk around as me 24 hours a day, that was beautiful, So I wish that for everyone.
Well, as Alyce says, get mad, and be your authentic self. These are like really yay moments. So thank you so much for that. We really appreciate it. Now, for our listeners, if they are thinking, wow, I need more, I need to find out more, I want to learn more, I need to speak to Alyce, I need to just be there, I need help to connect or to work with my indigo-ness, where can people find you?
Well, Ask Alyce 9999 on YouTube is my channel name. I'm on Facebook as well, Alyce Dylan. It's actually the same at Ask Alyce 9999. And from those two links, you get a bunch of links to everywhere else that I'm also. So I have a space on Fourth Wall. I have a space on. I have a Medium account. Lots of things. So I generally tend to spew a lot of words onto paper or onto podcast. And so that's where you can find them, either on YouTube or there. Yeah, and please, yes, do connect. I do individual consultations for people across the world. People sometimes don't want to do that. So just go and follow the podcast. Go and see if anything there makes sense to you. Because if it does, you might be one of us. Yeah? Yay.
And of course, we'll put all the links in the description below so people have an easy way to find you, to connect with you, to see more of your content, and to really learn more and get deeper into this topic. If it resonated, if there was anything that people like, feels right, it feels like maybe, then go ahead and follow and connect with Alyce. So thank you so much for being here today. I loved it. We always, as Natalie said, try to squeeze in a few more juicy questions in there, and I always love closing down with a question around, we are all about finding more life in one's life, to lean more into life. And I'm always curious what it is that gives you life. And it could be work related, it could be the topics we talked about, and it could be something very random and like, right now I'm obsessed with this and this gives me life.
That's an interesting one, and I think it must be purpose. I think that's always what connects us more with life. My fairies, I'm very grateful to all the guidance I get all day, every day. I have these incredible conversations, guidance from them. And they've always directed me to this purpose, which is to try to help people to understand that they're not broken, that they're just trying to fit themselves into a mold that they were never meant to fit into. And every time I do that, whether it's in teaching Reiki classes or consulting with individuals or speaking to somebody arbitrarily that I meet, that's what's exciting to me. That every now and then I see someone turn that corner from I'm broken to maybe I'm not broken. So that's what it gets me up in the morning. That's what is exciting to me. And of course, my 5-year-old, whom I adore. So, there's nothing like children. Get us out of bed in the morning.
Thank you so much. And we really appreciate your time with us today, your energy, your guidance and your wisdom and your knowledge and that you've shared with us today. We really appreciate it. So thank you very much.
And I would like to thank you two ladies for going out on a limb and making a podcast focused at helping people just to be better, to live better, because that's awesome. That's just anyone who takes the bull by the horns and tries to just find truth and share it. That's just wonderful. So thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And for our listeners, what have you got from today? This has been very much stepping off what we would normally talk about. This has been a totally new topic. We've talked spirituality, we've talked woo-woo, we've talked health, but we've never gone down this path. So we would love to know your thoughts. We'd love to know, what were those aha moments that got you thinking, hang on a minute, I'm not broken, I might be. And you fill in those gaps. We would love to know. This has been a very different type of conversation that we've normally had, but we are going more and more into finding different ways and having these different conversations. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.